Okay, so apparently I think you know where I'm going with this. These Harry Potter films were directed by Christopher Columbus, Alfonso Cuarón, and Mike Neville. Excellent directors who, in their own way, made spectacular films. And as you can see, Warner Brothers had an irritating habit of changing directors almost every film. This made the films inconsistent in mood, style, and the general tone.
Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry? Dumbledore asked calmly.
Harry! I protest! Harry, you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?
But hey, at least they had great directors which made very good movies. Oh, Alfonso. You sexy beast. Okay, focus. But the cherry on the cake is that Warner eventually settled on this guy, David Yates, who is the most boring, lackluster, and unimaginative director of the bunch. Not only did he manage to take one of the most imaginative stories and make it as boring as possible, but also he got to make 4 of those. Well, okay, he's not totally bad, but he's definitely the worst thing to happen to the Harry Potter franchise. I'm Mithil Boras and this is Artective. And today we shall take a look how. Now, because this is going to be a critique on David Yates' style, we'll first, for contrast, see what made the first 4 films great. I'm going to pick a scene from The Chamber of Secrets directed by Christopher Columbus and explain what makes the scene so great. The first thing I notice in this scene is how dynamic the movement of the characters and their interactions are. Harry and Ron are anxious, their backs hunched, leaning forward, out of their breaths. And Lockhart,
Yes, urgent call, unavoidable.
well, he's anxious to get out as soon as possible, so he's stuffing his clothes, interacting with stuff. It's energetic, it sells the emotion. And now I know you might be thinking, wait, isn't that kinda obvious? Of course the characters are going to move. Any filmmaker would do that. Well, for some people, it isn't that obvious, and I'll get to that in a bit. After Lockhart spills the truth about himself, Columbus gives us a close-up and a barely noticeable zoom-in on Harry's face. It subconsciously registers the feeling of realization Harry is having. The close-ups continue briefly as the characters argue, and we invade their personal spaces. But very soon, Columbus pulls back when all of them fail to find their footing. Now, in this scenario, we have other main elements at work here. The way the film editing puts the scene together with precise cuts. And if one incorrectly edits the scene, it becomes jarring, noticeable. So there you have it, movement, camera, and film editing. Now filmmaking is obviously much more complex than this. It also depends on the type of the scene you're shooting, but I guess we can agree that these 3 elements are essential in making a scene great. And by extension, making the entire film great. It's so flawless that you don't even notice it, and that's what great filmmaking is. It doesn't draw too much attention to itself, but instead shifts our focus towards enjoying the story and the characters.
I was always fascinated just by the stories. I wanted to find a film. Every time I go to the movies, I want to find a film where I can lose myself in the story.
Alfonso Cuarón and Mike Neville too understood the fundamentals. This is what makes me come back again and again to these stories because they go through the experience effortlessly. Now the filmmaking isn't flawless. Columbus's feel a bit juvenile, and Neville's overly dramatic characters like Dumbledore are off-putting. But they are the kind of directors who know how to make engaging films. And well, Cuarón. Okay, so if Alfonso, Neville and Columbus are the oasis in a desert land blooming with beautiful fauna, fertility and water, Yates is the barren wasteland which is just dry, plain, neither hot nor cold, neither terrible nor good. It doesn't have any defining personality, it is just there. Let's have a look at a few bite-sized examples. The scene where Harry confronts his friends because they kept him in the dark the entire summer by writing no letters.
After all, I'm the one who saw Voldemort return. I'm the one who fought him. I'm the one who saw Cedric Diggory get killed.
Did you feel that? Or how about when Hermione is tortured while Ron and Harry can do nothing about it? Both of them are agitated angry, frustrated. But did you feel their frustrations? In both the cases, it seems the actors who are massively talented just awkwardly stand or walk a small distance. It just doesn't sell the scene. Both these scenes play out differently in the books, with Harry and Ron respectively screaming at the top of their voices. So what is holding them back? In comparison, Lockhart showed far more energy and emotions. And by Harry himself in The Prisoner of Azkaban,
He was that friend!
but this time he isn't even standing. Acting isn't just about showing emotions on your face. It must also translate in the way you act. And this is where I have my problems with David Yates. Frequently, his scenes simply contain actors standing in one spot, saying their dialogues, the camera just plainly filming them. It feels mechanical. There is no movement, there is no interesting camera work, and hence there isn't even any need for any good film editing. His style is the most basic and bland of all. Simply shoot the scene as is with not much regard to how the actors should move or block or how the camera should even work. Even when you do see them moving, it's linear and straightforward. In contrast, when a scene calls for the actors to stay in one place in the earlier films, the directors often tried to make the scene interesting by either pushing in the camera, panning the camera, zoom-ins, beautiful long takes, or even simple gestures like a head turn. And even when a scene doesn't necessarily call for characters to move or walk because it's all dialogue, we still got scenarios that did the opposite so that it becomes fascinating and interesting to watch. These directors created settings to suit the mood of the scene. David Yates, on the other hand, has none of that understanding. Now, here is where things start to fall apart, because there is a lack of interesting direction, because there is no miss or scene, and any kind of blocking from the actors. We get these series of awkward scenes wherein the actors sort of just tend to stand a lot. I mean a lot. It's as if the actors have run out of things to do, so they just stand there doing nothing. Sometimes the camera tends to linger too long on them, because of which there is an absence of the graceful filmmaking that the previous directors have. There are other times when their reactions also don't convey much, and that is why it becomes difficult to connect to them on a human level. One of the worst offenders is definitely this scene from the Malfoy Manor, especially when Dobby loosens a chandelier on Bellatrix. Just count the number of seconds Dobby takes to unscrew the whole thing. Yes, 9 seconds. And these are some of the most infamous Death Eaters who possess superhuman magic abilities. So, of course, they are just gonna conveniently stand around like Dumbos doing nothing. I mean, come on. I can improve this scene simply by editing. Much better. I know this shot is meant to be funny, but it disrupts the pacing of the scene entirely. Okay, if my arguments still have you unconvinced, let's make it fair game and compare two very similar scenes. One from The Chamber of Secrets and the other one from The Order of the Phoenix, directed by Yates. To set the stage, these two scenes are essentially Harry and Dumbledore discussing the connection Harry has with Voldemort. So, how will Columbus and Yates direct similar scenarios? Let's start with Columbus. Now, in Columbus's scene, the topic of conversation changes in the following way. School rules.
You have broken perhaps a dozen school rules.
Connection to Voldemort.
You can speak Parcel tongue, Harry.
And the Sorting Hat.
Why then did the Sorting Hat place you in Gryffindor?
Even by visually studying this shift in conversation, we can see how the character positions and directions have changed every step of the way. And this is because every time the conversation shifts, Columbus is making his actors physically move. Not only does this keep the scene interesting as nothing remains static, but also it increases the emotional weight of the entire scene. In technical terms, this is called blocking. Take for example the shift from 1 and 2. This transition comes when Dumbledore gets up and urges Ron to send an owl to Azkaban.
We want our gamekeeper back.
Dumbledore then turns to Harry, which starts the conversation about how similar Harry and Voldemort are. Now Dumbledore, being the headmaster, had every reason not to get up from his seat. But I believe he does so because he genuinely is concerned about explaining Harry the extreme importance behind the connection he has to Voldemort.
That something is troubling you. Am I right, Harry?
And obviously this is not something you do while sitting behind your desk. After Dumbledore is done explaining this vital information, he lets Harry put all the pieces together himself. We are made aware of this by the fact that Dumbledore now eases into his chair and lets Harry do all the talking. His job now is done, and now it's Harry's turn to take center stage.
Why then did the Sorting Hat place you in Gryffindor?
In their conversation about the Sorting Hat, we have both Harry and Dumbledore now locked in their positions. Now, how can we make this visually interesting without having them move? That's where the camera angles and the editing come in. Columbus does not stick to a simple short reverse shot where the camera cuts to Dumbledore and Harry, then back to Dumbledore. You get the idea. It's the camera angle instead that changes as the conversation jumps from Harry
So the Sorting Hat was right. I should be in Slytherin.
to Voldemort
You possess many of the qualities that Voldemort himself prizes.
to the Sorting Hat,
Why then did the Sorting Hat place you in Gryffindor?
Because I asked it to.
to finally concluding with Dumbledore's beautiful words.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
If this intricate dance of movement, camera angles and editing is not enough to convince you what a genius of a director Columbus is, then I guess I don't know what will. But now you must be curious what David Yates will do. Well, not much, to be honest. The difference is literally night and day. This is a crucial conversation between two key characters that will change the direction of the series. But Yates filmed it in a way that suggests the director wanted to wrap things up in an hour or two. There are only two cameras in this scene, one on Harry and the other on Dumbledore, that functions as a simple short reverse shot. The camera on Harry remains virtually static the entire time. The camera on Dumbledore is a little more interesting, but nothing compared to the dance-like filmmaking of Columbus. What's even more intriguing is that this scene is dulled down compared to the original one in the book. Once again, Harry is screaming at the top of his voice in the book, demanding answers, demanding why Dumbledore didn't talk to him the entire year, demanding why he didn't let Harry know about the prophecy. He's raging due to the fact that his freaking godfather died. But is there even an ounce of that anger or frustration in this scene? Does this scene sell Harry's emotions? What is holding him back? Most importantly, what is holding David Yates back? Now let's see how Yates fares in comparison to Alfonso Cuarón. The two scenes are again similar in the following way. It takes place in the Great Hall, new staff members are introduced, Dumbledore gives a speech on darker times, and then we have Harry's reaction to that speech. I wanted to take note of how Hagrid and Lupin are introduced in Cuarón's version. In The Half-Blood Prince, however,
Horace Slughorn.
right after this, Dumbledore proceeds to give a speech on darker times, and Harry's reaction to it is intercut with the speech. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, note the camera slowly creeping onto the actors' faces. It feels eerie and claustrophobic, as though we can feel the danger lurking outside Hogwarts. In contrast, and as usual, Yates keeps a distance from his characters. There is no sense of intimacy like in Cuarón's version. Now, giving credit where it is due, I love the way Yates cuts to the Aurors who are pacing outside the hall, and to Draco Malfoy, who is nervously fidgeting with his thoughts. It actually really adds to the build-up and tension of the entire film. Without these cutaways, I still enjoy the scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban more. I feel more creeped out every time I watch it, even with the knowledge that, spoiler alert, Sirius Black is an innocent man. You know it's something special when a film makes you feel the same way, no matter how many times you watch it. In David Yates' case though, it's just another ordinary filler scene he has to get out of the way.
Now off to bed. Pip pip.
I believe that David isn't totally at fault here. For David Yates, this was an overwhelming jump from television to a multi-million-dollar franchise with numerous moving parts like production design, hundreds of actors, and even CGI. You can even see the flat, dull style of television in Order of the Phoenix. That is not to say that David Yates didn't actually try and become at least a little better, albeit still a passable director. There are a million more things I could complain about, but as time is short and I've been ranting now for like 10 minutes, here are some truly great things that Yates really did bring to the franchise. His handheld shots, for instance, are some of the most incredible in the entire franchise. The most memorable I feel is the one right after Sirius is killed. You feel the intense rush of adrenaline and hatred that surges like electricity through Harry. Somehow it really made me feel satisfied when Harry used the Cruciatus Curse. To be honest, this entire scene is mind-blowing and really surprising. Right from Voldemort's sharp spells to the sound effects and complete lack of music, and this brilliant shot. And Harry Potter is in the end a story about awkward teenagers, so Yates's awkward style of filmmaking really comes in handy in many scenes. Also, a shout out to this magnificent scene. Some people tend to look at it in a creepy way, but I feel this scene was a small awkward respite from all the terrible things these characters go through. And the best part is, the Deathly Hallows Part 2 is when I really saw Yates open up to newer possibilities. The prospect of filming multiple plot lines and mixing them seamlessly is enormously joyful, and this is what I believe forced David Yates' hand and made him film in the most innovative way possible. Yates also employed the use of those crazy long takes Cuarón is known for, and it just works. It's smooth, quick, doesn't draw too much attention to itself, and it keeps the pacing tight. One scene that truly stands out to me is the Lady of Ravenclaw scene. Just look at the way Harry keeps running behind the Lady of Ravenclaw, shifting places, following her. You really feel his urgency, his need to desperately know the truth. And Yates cuts back to other events of the impending battle so that we feel the stakes are high. This is brilliant filmmaking, and to Yates I just want to say,
Thank you.
sadly, David Yates was 3 films too late, and well, old habits die hard. I can still see the stiffness in the characters, the blank expressions, right till the end sequence. So at least in my books, the bad massively outweigh the good. These problems always tend to stick out and take me out of the experience when I have my yearly Harry Potter marathon. So I wanna ask you guys again, did you feel this? Or this? Did you feel this? Or how about this?
And you know what? Movies are very expensive. It's, aside from the cost of making films, to take your family out to the theater to see a film is a very expensive proposition. And if there's not a sense of satisfaction afterwards, if there's not a sense that you've seen something special,
that has taken you somewhere.
That's taken you somewhere, that has made you forget your life for 2.5 hours, then I feel like I haven't done my job. And I felt that way on occasion, but not in
terms of movies you made.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll sit in the audience and I'll say to myself, this isn't working for the audience the way I want it to work.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, it can be okay, but it's not where you wanted it to be.
Exactly. Okay is never good enough.